What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, one of the members of my Discord sent me a message and asked me to check out this video from Tim Ferriss. I learned Filipino in 4 days, but I clicked on it. I haven't watched it yet. I literally just clicked on it, and then I saw this one recommended, How to Quickly Learn a New Language, My Methods and Processes, and this is from Tim Ferriss. Now, this is a name that I have not heard in eons. I actually completely forgot that Tim Ferriss existed, and for those who don't know who he is, he was like... I don't know, is like massive in the space for like self-improvement, entrepreneurship and all this type of, like, just basically that type of space. Okay. And I remember like reading his book freaking, I don't know, it must have been 10 years ago. Like, this video is from 8 years ago. I actually got to check now to see if he's still active at all, to find out like what's going on. He's still posting. Oh wow, he has dropped the fuck off. 3.8 views, 3.4 views, 24k, 33, 3.8. Damn, he has definitely dropped off, but maybe he's just like pivoted in a different direction and YouTube's not that important anymore. But like, to give you an idea, I even got the dude's book. Okay, I got this book like 10 plus years ago. I read it through. It's the 4-Hour Work Week. I think I was just out of the military and I was trying to explore different avenues of making money while I was an actor. Like, I literally was highlighting shit in here, okay, and just using it as kind of like inspiration. But this is going to be an interesting moment. I'm going to watch a video from a guy who I respected quite a bit about language learning, and I'm going to see if this is one of those moments where you shouldn't meet your hero. Now, I'm not going to say he is necessarily my hero, but let's see if he actually knows what he's on about.
Here, I thought I would talk a little bit about accelerated learning in specifically the capacity of memorizing foreign vocabularies.
Okay, so I will be definitely speeding this up a little bit. Okay, let's go. Doof.
How do you learn a language? I've thought a lot about this, and I thought I was terrible at languages up until about 15. I had done very poorly at Spanish, and when I moved from one school to another, I had a chance to choose from other languages. And since I had friends who were going into Japanese, I figured, well, if I'm going to fail in languages, I might as well fail in a class where my friends are at least in the same room. I went to Japanese and eventually went to Japan as an exchange student. And that triggered an entire discovery of my own ability to learn languages and your ability to learn languages. I was not bad at languages. I just had the wrong method. I had teachers who really weren't enabling me to create approaches that would make the language stick. So I'm going to help you with a few different approaches and examples that I've used over and over and over again. So I'm not going to talk about learning languages ad nauseum in every respect, because that could be hours and hours long. If you want some of that, I highly recommend that you just go to tim.blog. There's a topics section and it has language learning. I have a bunch of different articles that I've written, as well as articles by Benny Lewis, who's fantastic.
That is another name I have not heard in forever, Benny Lewis. He was basically the instigator of Learn a Month in like 30 days or 3 months. Sorry, 3 months, okay. And I remember talking with Benny Lewis back when I was an Esperanto YouTuber for my app, because we were basically just reaching out to creators and, influencers to, help promote the app we were working on, the language space. God, what is Benny Lewis up to these days? Okay, so here's his channel. Only 122k subs? No, he must have another one. Look at that. See? He speaks Esperanto. It's right there in the logo or whatever, the freaking banner, okay. Last video posted 1 month ago. Forget 197 countries. I'm chasing 3,000 states instead. Damn, he's fallen off as well. But he must have like a fluent in 3 months. Fluent in 3 months. Because that was his brand. Here we go. Okay, so Benny Lewis, 1 month ago. He's still making content, but... What's happened? 33. I swore he was like millions of followers. I swore. Maybe, because this was more like the blog space type of thing. So this is when people were like heavy into blogs, okay? So this is his blog right here. So maybe he wasn't as big on YouTube as I remember. Because like, I'm literally bigger than his full in 3 months channel, which is saying a lot, okay? Anyway, if you want me to do any reacts to Benny Lewis videos, let me know down in the comment section, or any other videos from Tim Ferriss. But for now, we're going to watch this one.
Irish Polyglot is his nickname, and a handful of other folks, which are spectacular and have links and links and links to tons of resources. I'm going to talk about vocab, because most people are very intimidated by learning a high volume of words. And if you approach it the right way, you can actually learn hundreds of words per day if you wanted to make that effectively your full-time job.
No, you can't. Not with any like real retainment over the long term. You could do it short term. And I know because I've done 100 words per day for 6 days in a row with Chinese, and it's exhausting. It takes hours. Your Anki reviews build up. You could use mnemonics, it doesn't matter. But what happens is you rapidly lose all that really, really quickly. So you can kind of do, if it is your full-time job, 100, maybe more words a day, depending on the person and your endurance level. But when people start talking about hundreds of words a day, nah. And by the way, when I'm also saying you're learning those words, it's more learning to recognize. You don't actually learn how to produce all those words, hundreds of words a day. You just learn to recognize, like passively recognize in context.
If you want to make it just a part-time gig, you can still learn 10 to 100 words per day if you really make an effort of it. And if you do that, you don't have to learn 100,000 words. To be functionally conversationally fluent in a given language, meaning you can hold a long conversation, you really only need about 2,000 words.
Nope. Okay. So we're already starting to fall into the traditional territory of saying you only need 2K words. 2K words gets you the basic structure of the language. It does not get you the core components of the conversation. However, I know why people say this, because with Spanish, it probably works, because the rest of the words in Spanish, as long as you got those 2K ones, you're able to recognize those via cognates in English and possibly other languages. So Spanish, you can get away with this. But with Chinese, for example, there's no way in hell you're getting away with this. So it really depends on the language.
Very rough approximation, and there are some fantastic flashcards, for instance, from companies like VizEd, VIS-ED.com.
Never even heard of that company. This just shows you, this is an 8-year-old video, okay, how much the space has changed.
Which compiles the flashcards from high-frequency word lists based on usage in newspapers, books, and so on. What I would say, though, is that...
And here's the thing, okay, like if you're going off a word list that's based on newspapers and books, that's very different to conversations. So, like, if you're trying to do the 2,000 most common words in the fastest way possible, well, then you should target it on exactly the domain of speech that you're going to be operating within. So, for example, if you're doing business, then you want 2,000 words of business vocab, conversational business vocab, if that's what you're working towards, okay? As opposed to just 2,000 words in general, because there's going to be a lot of random words in there that you probably don't need. Even though the first 1,000 words is probably going to be similar across all domains, the next 1,000 or so, that's where it becomes very domain specific.
This is best illustrated by example. So rather than rote, i.e. the repetition of this in English is this in Spanish, this in English is this in Spanish, and just hoping that that is going to gain a foothold in your mind, let's just say cow and vaca, V-A-C-A. All right, so vaca is cow, vaca, cow, etc. How would you remember this?
Yeah, that caught me off guard there because I was expecting baka.
We are highly visually adapted. We are evolved to be very visually acute, and we are driven that way, and our memory is highly tagged and cued by any type of imagery. So what I would suggest in such a case is that you use something that has been nicknamed the link word mnemonic. There are other ways to label it. Really all this entails is creating a link between the words that is image-based. So if we have a word like vaca, and I would encourage you when you're first learning vocab to the extent possible not to fixate on the spelling because it can throw you off. Vaca, what does that sound like? Vacuum, maybe. All right, so what could you imagine? You could imagine cow, because you want to use the Q in English, because if you can recall the Spanish, let's say, in this case from English, you can always recognize the Spanish, but not vice versa, which is why if you're looking in a book and it has, say, the Spanish terms listed first and then the English terms listed, I wouldn't use it. I would switch the order. So I would even use a piece of paper, potentially, to cover up the Spanish and only use the English as a cue, as your native language. So, vaca. Let's imagine that there is a cow and it has a really oddly shaped head that looks like the end of a vacuum and it's sucking up the grass on the ground. All right? So it's a cow.
I should probably not be listening to this just because it's now going to inject an image into my brain between vaca and cow. For Spanish, okay? It doesn't really matter. I'm way past that point. But like, the reason I'm pointing that out is because these things do help you to recall words, but you have to step through these stories, and it creates kind of a an intermediary that can sometimes really delay the acquisition of the word. And there are points where if you don't utilize that word then immediately and quite a bit, then only the story sticks and you start to lose even though what it was connected to, like the sound. So you'll be like, oh, you might actually do something like, oh, okay, so it's like a vacuum cleaner cow. So it's a vacuum. Yeah, vacuum cleaner. See, like you could instantly lead yourself astray by doing this.
With a head like a vacuum sucking up grass. Cow, vacuum, vaca. All right, that would be a very simple example. Other approaches you could take, which are a little more flexible, but more or less the same thing. If you have something much more complicated, so let's say you have a term like momaku hakuri. Momaku hakuri is detached retina in Japanese. So number one, you
Let me know down in the comment section how good his Japanese is. I don't speak Japanese yet.
have something that's a lot longer. Momaku hakuri. All right, the hell does that sound like in English? Not a whole lot. It's also something a little more complex, detached retina. And what you realize quickly is that you generally just need a cue, which is why, for instance, you'll see a higher hit rate on the Wheel of Fortune if you give people the first few letters than, say, the last few letters. So taking that as analogy, the way we would work with that is momaku hakuri. What does the first part sound like? Momaku, moma, MoMA. Okay, maybe it sounds like the MoMA. So you live in a place like San Francisco, New York, and the Museum of Modern Art. So it sounds like the MoMA. All right, well, you could imagine then people walking into the MoMA, looking at displays and just having their eyeballs blow out of their heads, okay? So just imagine a bunch of people walking into the MoMA and getting detached retinas because their eyeballs blow out of their heads and like splatter the paintings in front of them. All right, and then that, because you have MoMA, there's a decent chance that you will then remember Momaku Hakuri. And in the case of, say, Japanese, you have the characters which you would learn later, and it
So basically, this just sounds very similar to what Mikel is now harping on about today. For those who don't know, he's basically the new Tim Ferriss in a lot of ways when it comes to this type of language learning method, promoting this online. This sounds intuitive. It sounds like it's good and it works. I have tried this. The problem is, once you start getting hundreds of these mini stories in your head, you start mixing them up. There's only so much you can really shove in there at one point, okay, without just resulting in straight up drilling. Because you actually get to the point where then you start to have to drill these stories, which is like drilling the intermediary as opposed to the end goal. So realistically, yeah, you could probably do, let's say 100, 200, maybe more of these in a day, but you're going to be drilling them. You might as well just drill the words straight up. And like, maybe for the real troublesome ones, do this. But if you're doing this for every word, bro, that's just a bad idea. You're going to have so many stories floating around your head.
It becomes even easier because you will be breaking that word into momaku hakuri, into a few characters, okay? If you are learning, so that is how you would tackle, say, something that's slightly more complex in terms of a longer word, for instance. If you are learning a tonal language, such as Mandarin, so I've studied
Oh, here we go.
Mandarin and spent time in China at 2 universities. How should you learn tones? That is, of course,
I want to hear him speak some Mandarin.
part of learning the vocabulary. This is something that just slaughters a lot of students of Chinese, particularly if they have lax teachers. So number one, you need merciless, hard-ass teachers because they will bludgeon you, and they should, into training your vocal cords to make the proper sound. I don't care how many times you hear something like yeshu, if you haven't developed the actual vocal cord ability, which is just like doing any type of stretching or strength training, you have to condition your throat to be able to make those sounds. You are SOL, you are shit out of luck. And if they
He's right about this. But I wouldn't say this is just Chinese specific. This is all languages. You should really drill the sounds from the beginning of all languages.
don't reinforce that and force you to get it correct and train properly, you're going to do a lot of bad repetitions. And I met many students who, after 6 months of doing Chinese, had a ton of what they thought was great vocabulary. They went to China and nobody understood a thing they were saying. They had to
This is so common in those videos where like people say, oh, you know, I speak 6 languages, and then they give a demo of Chinese, and I'm listening to it, I don't understand it, I'm reading the subtitles, I look down the comment section, there's like a bunch of natives down there saying literally incomprehensible. Chinese is just, the sounds are just more important. You can get away with a lot more in other languages, but with Chinese, it's just like, you don't have that.
start from scratch. So don't do that. Now we come down to choosing materials. And what I would say is that if possible, and this is an unpopular position, but you want to use a writing system in English, so the romanizing of, say, Chinese, that indicates the tone in the spelling. This is very controversial. So there's a system, for instance, called GR, which stands for 国语罗马字. And you would say have first tone in Chinese for 国, G-U-O, then 国, second tone, which would be country, like 国语, country language, which is kind of a long story and will piss off
His pronunciation is actually pretty good.
a bunch of mainlanders, but that's okay. So 国, G-W-O. And then if I want to say 去过, so he has gone, I have gone, 过, fourth tone, G-U-O-H. This helps dramatically with memorization of vocab, and specifically retaining the tones. The more popular system that is used in textbooks for Chinese, for Mandarin, certainly probably for Cantonese too, is pinyin. Pinyin is where you would have, say, this, 过, and then they would use a diacritical mark at the top to say 过, second
I know there's other systems out there, but I just use Pinyin. Like, it works perfectly fine.
tone, or fourth tone, 过, with these funky little lines on the top and the bottom. Students do not remember that stuff, from all I can tell and everything I've seen.
they're perfectly fine. Easy to remember. Like I don't understand. Is this something the other Chinese learners down there in the comment section let me know have issues with? Like, to me, it's very obvious and visual what it means. Like, they literally draw out the tone direction.
Problem is, as a teacher in a university, you are oftentimes rewarded by how many students you can keep in a class or get to a passing grade. GR is a huge pain in the ass in the beginning. But if we're thinking like Abe Lincoln, if I'm given 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. You want to do the heavy lifting in the beginning so that you can have a much smoother ride later on. And in a tonal language, part of that is choosing the right romanization of that language. And in my opinion, GR is highly, highly, highly underrated. It's just a huge pain in the ass in the beginning. So you'll be very frustrated for the first couple of weeks, maybe.
You're probably just better off learning Pinyin realistically, because like all input systems, they work for like via Pinyin. Like that's what natives use when they're typing on a phone. They just type in Pinyin, or maybe, you know, they can hand draw it, but most of them just type Pinyin. So it's just like, just adapt to it. Learn it. Stop trying to find like a little roundabout way of doing it.
And then looking back, if you actually stick with it, you'll think to yourself, my God, that was just a divine gift that I learned in GR instead of Pinyin.
I'm going to have to do some research into this GR thing.
All right. And then there are, of course, the tools that if you want to space your repetition, even if it's practicing the recall of something like cow in Spanish. What was that? Cow, vacuum, vaca, right? Or if you're trying to think, detached retina, which you probably won't have much use for, but I learned it because I read comic books that had a lot of fighting in them to learn Japanese, since they talked about detached retinas a fair amount. Well, detached retinas, blowing onto the paintings, where? At the momaku hakuri is detached retina. All right. But you still have to figure out how frequently, how often to use these types of, say, flashcards or cues. Remember that you're going to look at the English first, not the target language first. And there are many different things you could use. You could read an article, say, in Wired Magazine written about super memo, which is a very fascinating spaced repetition approach.
Yeah, you can just see how old this video is, eh?
Super memo, which has then been turned into, say, software programs and apps like Anki, A-N-K-I, which in Japanese is actually rote memorization, so there's some irony to that, but Anki, A-N-K-I. And then, of course, and I'm biased here because I've been involved with the company and helped them, Duolingo. It is the most popular free language learning.
Like, he gives all these, like, recommendations. Not bad. Okay. And it ends with Duolingo. Now, to be a little bit fair to him, this is 8 years ago when the courses were being built out by volunteers who actually cared about the languages they were working on. It was prior to all the monetization, but bro, that sounds so bad in today's day and age.
Software on the planet, 100 million plus users, and they also have a separate app that is used for flashcards. So there are many different ways to approach this, many ways to learn languages, but it is my firm belief that if you approach it in a rational, methodical way, that you can become conversationally fluent in just about any language in 8 to 12 weeks. And that is coming from someone who...
See, this is the problem with these types of videos, AK. Even when you've got someone who does actually speak the language, they present some ideas that can work, depending, and then they become super hyperbolic by saying, okay, we take this basic concept idea, and then we stretch this to absolute insane limits, okay? And then we just slap on some random short time frame. Like, nothing's changed in the last 8 years about how these language influences operate. Like, I give him credit. His Chinese sounds pretty good. But I highly doubt he did that in 8 weeks.
Wit gave up on Spanish for years and years and years. But now, having practiced with Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Indonesian, i.e. Bahasa, I've played with and toyed with Turkish, Greek, all these languages for just a few weeks at a time for fun. In many cases,
yeah, so he's an absolute beginner in most of these languages by the sounds of it.
I believe 8 to 12 weeks, you can be conversationally fluent, or at the very least functional, in almost any language. Certainly
Conversationally fluent, functional, you're saying B1 level. That's just insane.
any language that I've encountered. So that should be very reassuring. You can tackle many, many languages, not just one. And if you learn...
Obviously, there are caveats to what I'm saying here. With certain languages, depending on the language you speak, if you make this your full-time job, you can get close to something that is conversational fluent in a short period of time, okay? But, like, you can't just say this type of stuff and just throw it out there for languages like Japanese if someone's a native English speaker.
Learn another language, just one additional language, you have a brand new lens through which to view everything in life. Your thinking changes, your perspective changes, your empathy changes. So if you're trying to figure out a way to hack your lifespan, think about all these drugs metformin, rapamycin, whatever. You think about all these ways you might double your lifespan. Well, one way you can do it right now is by learning a second language. So, Godspeed, good luck. I hope that helps. And if you want more on mnemonic devices, certainly I wrote quite a bit about mnemonic devices and learning things like languages in the 4-Hour Chef, because it's actually a book on accelerated learning. There's also a fantastic book by, I believe the name is Higbee. I haven't read it in decades, Your Memory and How to Improve It. It's an excellent, excellent book on tactical and very concrete mnemonic devices that have been used for centuries that are very easy to implement.
Bro, it's crazy how much people are taking mnemonics to the extremes. Basically, Tim Ferriss here just seems to be an early version of Mikel the Hyperpolyglot. Mikel obviously just came and filled the space where Tim left off ages ago. People talk about mnemonics as if they're these magic keys. Like, I've used these things to... There are instances where mnemonics can help a lot. An example is, okay, when I was an actor, you would use mnemonics to help memorize a monologue in a very short period of time. But what you're doing here, okay, is you'll use something like a memory palace, where you're dropping off all these little cues within a virtual space that exists within your head, and then you mentally walk through it. But what you're doing, okay, is you're allowing to get this mental map in your head, and then you walk through it. But you can't just be like, okay, well, I'm done. No, you then need to walk through it probably like 10, 20, 30 times to actually then move that from your just, your imagination into your more long-term memory, okay, your short-term to your long-term memory. So even with this instance, okay, where he's like saying, you can get hundreds of words a day. Well, sure, you could probably create hooks for all of those words, but guess what you're going to have to do now? Hundreds of reviews per day in some form or another to actually make these move from your short term to your long term. And at that point, I doubt the efficiency of using these. I don't even know why I say I doubt. I know it doesn't work because I've tried it, okay. It's just crazy to me how it doesn't matter. We've had like 8 years pass since this video and people are still selling the same shit. Now, it makes me wonder about all the other fields he talks about, where he, for example, this book right here, The 4-Hour Workweek. I actually know some of the, basically this is just a book on drop shipping if you're interested, okay? And that's all it's really about, and just reducing the number of clients down to the ones that pay the most and the least amount of effort and stuff like that. I expected more. If you guys want me to react to another video from Tim Ferriss, maybe he's got some more ones where he goes actual in depth, let me know down in the comment section. I'll see you all in the next video, and if you're not there, you will be creating hundreds of mnemonics all about the beauty of my face.